I'm Nick Whalen from RotoWire. It's time for another edition of Bold Predictions. We're giving you 5 of them ahead of Week 8 of the NFL season. Number 1, Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers put 40 on the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Total in this game is set at 49.5. It's hovering around 50. I think we cruise over that number, mostly on the Packers side. Now, Jordan Love was not great last week against Houston. Made some really good plays, but I thought on balance there was more bad than good through a couple reckless picks. But you live with that, when he generates big plays at an extremely high rate. Now, the Jags defense, they give up more big plays than anyone in the league. They're still dead last in the NFL in pass defense EPA. They just gave up 250 passing yards to Drake May and the New England Patriots. They've already given up 35 points to the Bears, 34 to the Colts, 47 to the Buffalo Bills. Do not let a win over the New England Patriots fool you. This is still a very bad team and especially a very bad defense. I like the Green Bay defense to get back on the turnover train. They did not force a turnover in Week 7 for the first time all season. They actually forced at least 2 turnovers in each of their previous 6 games. 17 total turnovers forced on the year. This is a mistake-prone Jaguars team. They press when they need to play from behind. I think they'll do that in this game. Jags, maybe they can slow down the Packers running game. I will say that, but I love this spot for Jordan Love in the Packers offense. Green Bay ranks top 5 in yards per play in the NFL. Jags are 30th in yards per play allowed. They're dead last in opposing QB rating, dead last in yards per attempt allowed. Packers cruise to 6-2. They put a 40 spot on the Jags this week. Huge fantasy week for both Jordan Love and Jayden Reed. All right, we're sticking with the optimism here. Number 2, George Pickens goes for a second consecutive 100-yard game. Now, if you play fantasy football, which if you're watching this video, you better play fantasy football. You are well aware that Week 7 was a disaster week across the board for wide receivers, both from an injury perspective and a production standpoint. We closed the week with only 4 wide receivers topping 100 yards, and George Pickens, he was one of the lucky 4. He finished with 5 catches for 111 yards and a score, caught a couple moon balls, as Chris Collinsworth was calling them, from Russell Wilson. That was good enough to make George Pickens the wide receiver 2 on the week, behind only Amon-Ra St. Brown. Look, I got to eat crow here. I was wrong. Last week in this video, I said the Steelers would regret pivoting to Russell Wilson. They'd be back to Justin Fields within a month. Technically still possible, but not looking great right now. We're not closing the book on that one. But after a very shaky start, Russell Wilson settled in, looked fantastic, gave the Steelers offense exactly what it had been missing with Justin Fields. Will they miss Fields' mobility? Yes. But Russell Wilson's ability to get George Pickens involved, his willingness to throw the ball downfield, do it accurately, give Pickens those 50-50 balls, that's what the Steelers want. The longer Wilson starts, the better it will be for Pickens' fantasy stock. He's going to keep getting those jump ball opportunities. I mean, he's on the short list of the best 50-50 ball receivers in the NFL. I mean, it feels like it's a 90-10 ball when George Pickens is involved, especially against that horrendous Jets secondary. This week, he matches up against a Giants team that ranks bottom 10 in yards per target allowed, bottom 5 in catch rate allowed to wide receivers on the season. On balance, the Jets defense is solid. We saw them slow down the Bengals. We saw it against Philly last week, but it's a bend but don't break defense. It's prone to giving up big plays. Philly ripped off a few long runs. They had the long touchdown down the sideline to A.J. Brown. I think we see a couple of those big plays from George Pickens. I think the Steelers have to go to a more pass-heavy attack with Dexter Lawrence wrecking things in the running game. I'm back in on George Pickens. Russell Wilson has arrived to rescue his fantasy season. I think we get a second straight 100-yard game from George Pickens. Before we get to our next prediction, please give this video a like if you're enjoying it, and make sure you're, of course, subscribed to the RotoWire YouTube channel. We'll continue bringing you lots and lots of content over there through the rest of the NFL season. You can check out our alternate channel as well, RotoWire Fantasy Football. Hit that subscribe button right now. Okay, our next bold prediction for Week 8, Jameis Winston steps in. He does the unthinkable. He leads the Cleveland Browns not to a win, but to their first 20-point game of the season. So the bar here is obviously very, very low, but the Browns have played 7 games. They are yet to score more than 18 points in any of those games. They're the first team since the 2009 then Redskins to score 18 or fewer in their first 7 games of the season. If we actually count the end of last season, the streak stands at 9 games with 18 points or fewer for Cleveland. But anyway, the modern record, if you will, to begin a season is 11 consecutive games with 18 or fewer points, which was also by a Redskins team in 2004. So the Browns are chasing history here, but at long last, we will see Jameis Winston at quarterback, whether the Browns like it or not. It feels like for whatever reason, they wanted to pivot to Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's injured. It will be Jameis. We saw Jameis come in for one series, and what did he do? He led a touchdown drive. 12 plays, just over 2 minutes to make that a respectable finish against Cincinnati last week. Now, I like the Ravens to win this game, probably in semi-blowout fashion. I know it could be a letdown spot for them on a short week, but Baltimore's just a wagon right now. But this is a gettable defense, right? We saw it last week against the Bucs. Really shaky start to that game. Tampa was able to run the ball on Baltimore, which we have not seen much this season. They were throwing all over that Ravens secondary until Baker tossed 2 picks. But they also might be without Marlon Humphrey this week. And I think if this does turn into a garbage time scenario, that's exactly what Cleveland needs to reach the 20-point mark. This is where Jameis Winston thrives. He is the ultimate garbage time quarterback. I think Jameis Winston breaks the streak. I think the Browns lose this game, probably by multiple scores, but Jameis pushes them to their first 20-point game since December of last year. Number 4, Tyreek Hill. Remember Tyreek Hill? He's a wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins. He's back this week. He finishes the week as a top 5 wide receiver. So this is, of course, under the assumption that Tua will be the starter for Miami, which is the general belief at this point, barring some sort of setback. Otherwise, this would be the boldest prediction of the season if they were rolling out Tim Boyle this week. But we'll assume Tua is in. In week 1, Tyreek Hill was a top 5 receiver in PPR. Since then, he's finished 53rd, 57th, 51st, 31st, and then last week, 89th. In per week production. So he's got a lot of ground to make up. It's certainly possible that Tua could be rusty after the long layoff, but he's still just a massive upgrade over Tyler Huntley and Tim Boyle, bless his soul. Miami also plays at home this week against one of the worst defenses in football in the Arizona Cardinals. They just lost Dennis Gardeck. They also just allowed Justin Herbert to throw for 349 yards, with almost half of that going to a bunch of like backup tight ends. The Chargers basically had like 1.5 active receivers for that game. Arizona ranks dead last in yards per target allowed to wide receivers this season. They're 31st in completion percentage allowed, 29th in overall pass defense EPA. I think this is the week you're comfortable rolling out Tyreek Hill. You can finally put him back in your lineup. Don't expect him to get 2.4 points. He's going to be fired up to have a real quarterback for the first time in over a month. Tyreek Hill finishes the week as a top 5 receiver in PPR leagues, and Tyreek Hill fantasy managers can finally rejoice. All right, our 5th and final bold prediction for NFL Week 8. Playing without Jayden Daniels, the Washington Commanders win at home over the Chicago Bears. Look, I know it was the Panthers last week, but Washington did not miss a beat after Jayden Daniels went out one series into the game. I know they already had a defensive touchdown on the board. It was already a 2-score game. I get that, but Marcus Mariota stepped in and built that lead. And again, it came against one of the worst, if not the worst team in the NFL. But Mariota's a capable veteran starter. He's only 30 years old. He's not necessarily past his prime. He's not good, but he's not bad. He's not Tim Boyle. Hate to keep taking shots at our guy, Tim Boyle, but you understand. This team still put up 40 points last week. They've scored at least 34 in 4 of their last 5 games, but perhaps most importantly, I think the defense is starting to figure it out. This was one of the worst units in the NFL early in the season. They've allowed under 300 yards of total offense in 3 of the last 4 weeks, the lone exception being that Baltimore game. That was not a great defensive effort necessarily from Washington, but hey, played Baltimore to a 1-score game. I will say the overall numbers still aren't great. I'm not claiming that this is a fantastic defense by any means. It's not a plus defense, but it's improved week to week, and it's no longer the massive liability that it was early in the season, even after losing Jonathan Allen. I think there's a chance that they could get after Caleb Williams here, slow down Caleb, who's looked better over the last couple of weeks, but has also run into some really good schedule spots against the Rams and the Jaguars. But really, this will come down to whether Chicago is able to continue running the ball like it has in recent weeks. If so, then the Bears probably win this game. If DeAndre Swift carries 18 times for 120 yards, then yeah, Chicago's winning. If not, though, I think the Commanders' offense is enough of a well-oiled machine right now that it can still win this game with Marcus Mariota. I think they brought him in for a reason. He does similar things to Jayden Daniels, obviously not nearly as dynamic, but a guy who can run the same offense. It'll be a monumental task without Daniels, but hey, this is bold predictions. Last week, I said the Lions would go into Minnesota and win. And a lot of people in the comments told me that it was not bold enough. In fact, wasn't bold at all. And in retrospect, probably true, for being honest. So in response to that, we're going bolder this week. The Washington Commanders, led by Marcus Mariota, keep the dream season rolling. They beat the Chicago Bears at home this week.